So today I'm going to look at this MacBook Pro. This was given to me by a guy called Steve. It had an issue with the GPU, as these things do. This is a 2011, and the GPU issues on these are prolific. Almost every single one of them fails the GPU, just the way they are. So there's a modification board which is done by CMIzapper, or Harold, which is a little board you install and then you disable the GPU, and then you don't use the external GPU at all, you use the internal graphics of the CPU. That will then at least mean you've got a workable computer. The computer will be usable. You lose some functionality in some ways, like the external GPU, like the external display port. I think you can't drive an external monitor after that, something like that. It does affect a couple of things, and obviously it makes it less powerful for graphics, but at least your computer becomes usable again. Anyway, let's have a look at this thing. So this is what he sent me. So original box, which is nice. That's the first time I've seen an original box one of these. Got a charging cable, the actual computer, and an original charger. It's really nice. So I wasn't expecting all the other stuff. I knew about the computer coming. I didn't know about the rest of it. It's quite nice to get that little surprise too. So obviously it's been looked after because it's got the original stuff. You know, to still have all the original packaging and stuff means someone that looks after their stuff. So it's probably no fault of their own that's failed. It's just a GPU failure. That's what I do. So I think the first thing I'll do is I've just got this thing here, which is a battery port tester for the MacBooks. This is also made by CMIzapper. This is the Magsafe tester. So I'm going to quickly test the power supply, and we'll just see what that says. I mean, it should be fine, but just want to make sure. Okay, so there's the Magsafe tester, plugged in, powered up, ready to go. Let's get the cable from the charger, plug it in. $85-watt charger. Yep, it's all switching properly. There's a charger serial number. It looks like it's fine. It's doing 16.7 volts. So that's looking alright. The charger looks okay. Right, well, I'm not going to power it up straight away. What I will do is a quick visual inspection on the top. No signs of liquid damage. No sticky bits. That's all looking fine. So I'm going to pull it apart, look inside it first and see what the situation is, because I know that he tried to install a Tiresias, which is the GPU repair patch, which Harold came up with at CMIzapper. So I'm going to pull it apart and see what the situation is inside. I don't know what the situation is yet. Battery's nothing showing up at all, so batteries are completely dead or disconnected. Let's pull it apart. Alright, so the screws out. There's the cover, there's a battery in there. Battery is not plugged in. That's why there's no indication. That's a good thing for him to do. We have a wire running across here. Let's have a close look at this part for a start. Screen is plugged in. That's plugged in. Okay, everything else is plugged in apart from the battery. And there's no hard drive. That's fine. I was expecting there to be no hard drive. At least the brackets are in place. I've got all the bits I need to put hard drives in, so I'm not worried about that. It's got some RAM in it. What have we got in here? 2 gig. And another 2 gigs. It's got 4 gig of RAM built in. Let's have a close look at this. So there's a wire running across. I think that's part of the modification for the Tiresias. It allows for the brightness control of the screen. You only need it on certain system versions. If you're running an older system version, it doesn't actually need it. But in the newer system version, you do actually need to have that. So that's been added in. So I need to check all that stuff as well. Now, unfortunately, I don't actually have the correct Tiresias for this one. I've got the one for the 17-inch. I don't have the one for the 15-inch. I've used them all. I haven't got any spares left. I need to get some more. So I don't actually have any of those in stock. So if I needed to swap the actual unit out, it's a bit hard. So what I actually might do, I think, is pull this logic board out and inspect both sides of it, and just do that first and then see what we're dealing with. I've got all the screws out. The PCB should be ready to come out now. I've undone the charging port ones as well. Let's try and wiggle this out. Okay, there's the PCB. Let's move the chassis to one side. So just over here is the Tiresias module.
Click subscribe right now, quick, before you forget.
And this is where the wiring goes to. Let's get a close look at this. And I call it Tiresias, but is it Tiresias? I don't know. It's Greek, isn't it? So I don't know. Anyway, there's the module that's been installed. just so you can see it's piggybacked. That's the flash, and that is reprogrammed by this board. You've got these two wires coming over which go to these pads. Those are for the dimming control, so I need to check those to make sure they're done correctly as well. I haven't done that myself ever. I've only ever used these in older systems, so I didn't actually need to install the dimming control stuff because the original systems still worked fine. Didn't have to do that, but later systems, then you need to add that on. So I think I'll get the microscope out and have a really close look at this and try and see if there's any issues with this, and just rule that out. Now I'll check out this wiring, check online because the manual's online for this as well, and just make sure these wires are done correctly. And obviously I'll look closely as well where they actually go to, make sure they're not got any bridges or anything. So there's a close look at the board just here, as you can see. So it's pretty small stuff. I mean, here's my fingernail, give you an idea of scale. Not too small, but it's still a little bit tricky. So let's look at this thing under the microscope and take a really close look at what we're dealing with. So I've got it set up just pointing at the screen of the microscope, and there's the board in place, as you can see. Moving around so you can see there. So there's the actual memory chip there, which has to be reconfigured to allow for the GPU disabling, right? So it disables that chip there, reprograms this chip here. That's the original Mac one, right? That's on the logic board. Should specify that. It's got a hole in the circuit board here, and that's what pokes through it, and then you solder those on. And then you've got the two wires over here which come across. One goes to there, one goes off the other way. And I need to look at that in more detail to see how that's actually done, to see if they look alright or not. So it looks like it's going to one of the pads, like the test pads. The one behind it isn't touching. No, it's clear of that. So that wire there looks okay. I assume it's going to the right place. I need to check all that. So back to this part. Now I actually can see some problems with this. That main chip's soldered on properly. That looks fine. Right, the one that Harold's done to this chip here looks fine. Now look at the soldering on this one. Now this is a hard chip to actually solder properly. I've had problems doing this myself, right? So I'm not surprised there's an issue here. So just there, that pad there doesn't look like it's soldered onto that chip. There's a gap there. I'll get the reflections out of it, see a little gap. So that doesn't look like it's well done. This one's looking a bit dodgy. This one here is also looking a little bit dodgy, as is that one there. It might be okay, those two. They're borderline. But I think if I reflow these, it might change something. I'm going to check the wires out first, fix up the soldering on this, make that solve that problem. Now, it could be all it is that one there. It could be, just be that. So yeah, I'll do that, resolder it up, check the wires, make sure the wires are okay, drop it back in the chassis and we'll try it out. So I'm going to try and do this on camera. So there we go, got a bit of flux. Always need flux, especially on these chips. I'm just going to do all the pins. So it's going to get some decent solder. Clean my iron tip. This tip is massive for this, but it'll be fine. Bit of fresh solder on there. We shall try and bridge that gap there. So it doesn't want to bridge, see? That's why it's hard to do. And I'm looking at a microscope and I can see it's not going right. So that doesn't surprise me. That's why I knew this could potentially be a problem. So let's just get slightly more heat. Which is reflection on the screen right there. Can I get rid of that? Sorry about the bridges, I'm just trying to get the thing soldered. I'll get the bridges off after. Yeah, this chip is not wanting to solder very well. I can understand why it didn't go. Yeah. Let's put some even more flux on there. Let's give it a clean, I'll give it some more flux and I'll do some more. The chip is very resistant to taking that solder. I think that's definitely part of the problem. Okay, I think we're getting there. This leg here is still not cooperating. See, I'm just doing off and on, off and on, off and on. I'm trying not to get it too hot. See, it's still not really taking to that chip leg there. Even though I've got flux on there. Still not really wanting to take. It's interesting why it's being really resistant. Now I'm blobbing everywhere.
Blobby, blobby, blobby!
Yeah, it's just being a real pain to get that one leg there to go too. There we go, I think I've got it then. See, part of the problem is that you've got a gap between the actual leg and the PCB traces, and it has to try and bridge that gap. Got that one. Let's move on. The third one over is not doing too well. Okay, I think I've got that one. Back to this one here. Okay, it's got some kind of taking going on there now. Yeah, that's gone kind of. That side's alright. That side's gone. So let's check the other side again. Yeah, it's one pin here I'm still not happy with. Yeah, oh no, that might be alright. So I've checked out the wires and they both check out okay. This one here, which runs over to this side of the board, you've got a socket here for the fan, and it comes over to this pad here. So basically you remove a resistor here and then you put it onto this pad, and that's been done correctly. So whoever did this work before me, it's actually done okay. They've actually done alright. The only thing I don't like is how long this wire is. I'll just try to reroute it slightly and just try and take the slack up. I'm trying to get it from running across lots of other componentry and trying to get to parts where there's less stuff there, and once it's actually done I will tack that down with some UV curing stuff to make sure it doesn't move around. I'm guessing the original person that did this would have done that anyway, but because they never actually got it working, I'm guessing they just didn't bother with that because it just didn't work, so they stopped. And they didn't actually get to that point where they wanted to secure this wire down. I was going to say it's too long, but I've just routed it slightly across here. I'll take some slack off on top of that chip, and I'll tack it on top of that chip, and I'll tack it on top of this chip over here. And just try and get it off of componentry and that sort of stuff, and then spin it around so it runs across here, from this point here. So I'm going to run it over top of this chip here as well, and just try and get it so it's not actually rubbing on parts as much as possible, and just secure it down, because I don't actually trust enamel wire. I mean, it's okay, but I don't trust it to always be okay. If you've got some vibration it's constantly rubbing or something like that, then you could actually get it so it wears through the enamel and you can have all kinds of problems. So I'm going to tap this down, I'm going to secure it in place right now, and then we can put it back into the actual assembly and actually try it out. So that's that wire tacked down. I've got this UV stuff. I always use yellow. That one, that stuff that I've done. So yellow is there, and it's a bit messy, but that's the nature of it. Let's flip over to the other side. So I thought before I actually put this thing back in, I'll pull the heatsink off, check the heatsink compound, because who knows if it's ever been done. Because I noticed there's a lot of dust in this area. I mean, some parts have been cleaned, but there's some dust around the heatsink which hadn't been cleaned off, which made me think the heatsink had never been off. And sure enough, the heatsink compound is actually dry, so that needs replacing. I'm going to clean it off, put some fresh stuff on, get all the dust. I've got to check the GPU resistor yet to make sure the resistor's been removed. Let's flip over, so look, so everyone can see it. And GPU resistor is down here somewhere. And yep, the resistor has been removed, so that's fine. Right, let's put this ball back in the chassis now, and we can try it out finally and find out what the situation is. So I'm actually just going to put it in completely, because I'm confident it'll work. Let's plug the battery in. Okay, battery's plugged in. We have power. Not going to worry about the hard drive just yet. I just want to see if you've got anything on the screen. Moment of truth. There was no bong. There is no screen. Yeah. Okay, let's try some stuff. Let's plug in the Magsafe. Do a PRAM reset. Here we go. I think the battery was actually too flat. Do this a few times, completely close it out. Right. Your fans are running. Currently have no screen. Battery's currently charging. Fans are still running. Need to do something about this latch for the monitor cable. It's not very good. Right, well, that's not wonderful. Is that turned off? No, still down. Now it's turned off. Right, I have to do an SMC reset on this thing. And there's a trick to that. Basically what you do is you disconnect the battery, you hold in the power button for a while, hook up the Magsafe, leave the button pressed down for at least 10 seconds, then release it. Right? Let it run for a minute or so. If you get nothing on the screen, like just a grey screen, force power it down again. Have your external drive connected. I've got an external drive, all these ASD discs on it. Then power it back up again, holding the option key, so it forces it to try and boot off any drives it finds. You can choose which disk you want then. I need 144. I'm going to go straight to OS. So we've got a screen working right now, so brilliant. Because I did an SMC reset, the fan's going full bore because the battery's not connected and stuff like that, so it's not completely happy right now. And it just died. And we're going again. Now that was interesting. So because it did a reboot, it's trying to boot from the wrong disk now, I think. Might have to do this again. So I might not do the OS version of boot, I might do the EFI version. And I might plug the battery back in again as well. Let's see. So let's do the ASD. So I confirm it's going to come up again. Yes, it does. Right. So 144 on ASD, which is one of these, and it will just say EFI boot, which is really helpful. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 went over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's that one. It might not be. Okay, we got to that part. That's 146, not the right one. Let's just give it a chance to boot and try stuff. Maybe it'll tell us something anyway. Yep, wrong machine, that's fine. Do a restart, we'll try this again. Got to try and find 144. Okay, 144 is booted. Let's do a full test. Stop on error, do not stop, do continuous test. I think I will not test memory, I won't test memory. That takes too long. This will give errors. We just need to find out what errors it's going to give us. And I'll come back when it's done. But that's quicker than I thought because I didn't do a memory test. And everything so far passed. So I'm going to shut this down again, plug the battery back in again, do it again. Let's do the selection again. We'll do ASD again. But just because the EFI version runs doesn't mean it's okay. There could still be a problem because EFI does things differently compared to the OS version. I'm just going to run through the full EFI test again. So I want number 5. That one. Yep, SDS2104. Now I'm going to do a full test including RAM. I'll come back after that. That'll give us an idea if there's anything else which is underlying, which isn't obvious. Then I'll try booting it from the operating system and see if we're all good. It takes a while to come up initially. You can hear now I've got the battery plugged in, the fans have ramped down, it's not going full bore again. So I had one sensor failure already, which is the GPU V-core, which is not unsurprising because the GPU is turned off. The CPU one passed, GPU failed, but that's the only one that's failed so far. And that's not unsurprising. So, test is finished. One other thing that occurred to me is that very first time we did the test, it finished really quickly. That was in SMC bypass mode. That's when the fans are running full speed. So I don't think it actually tested everything. Because the second time when I had the battery connected and the fans are running normal speeds and stuff, it's tested a lot more stuff. It's done a full test, we've got a failure, and that's the one we saw before. We've only got one error failure because the GPU is disabled. Just because the EFI version runs and works does not mean the computer will work. I actually have another machine underneath my desk here which works perfectly fine in EFI mode, gives this kind of result, but it will not boot into an operating system. Just won't do it. I could probably try Ubuntu or Linux, something like that, it might work on that, but the macOS will not boot into it. Weirdest thing ever. So what I want to try now is booting into the OS version of this. Let's see if we can do that. Remember last time it just crashed, so it's probably a sign there could be more going on. So you're on OS 144, this one here. Select that one. And let's see what happens. Last time it just crashed, remember? But then I think I was running off battery at the time, wasn't I? Pretty sure I was running off battery, but now I've got the Magsafe plugged in, so it could be a difference. Well, this is looking promising. Clock's wrong, that's fine. So the OS version booted up. That's looking really promising, which means it's very likely to actually work. And I'll do this retest again, just because it does do some slightly different stuff. Error. Continue. Don't want to test optical drive. I know that runs. What kinds of runs? I think I'll leave it at that. Let's just run it as is, and we'll see what happens. Error. GPU sensor failure. Yep, we know about that one. I'll come back once it's done. It could take a while. Okay, testing has failed. As we expected, we got one fault anyway. And look over here, we only have one error. So that's purely that GPU failure. So everything else is testing okay, which is brilliant. Now, I've done a video on substituting the GPU temperature sensor. Because basically what it is, it's got a chip which is basically a MUX, and it checks all the temperature sensors and feeds that back. That's got two connections which go through to the GPU, so it uses the sensor inside the GPU to tell that device what the GPU temperature is. So I actually did a video on that a while ago showing how to basically bodge on a transistor onto the input of that MUX chip so that it thinks the GPU temperature is something else. So when the GPU doesn't give a temperature, you can still read a temperature from it. And what I actually did is I mounted that on a circuit board and basically glued it down, and it's right above the GPU, so it is basically in the proximity of that. So it does feed back a temperature from that instead. And this may need that, we'll see. I know when I've had problems with that before, I've had another machine, the GPU was working, it wasn't actually failed, but it would randomly lose the temperature reading. And that machine slow right down. And that's a little hack I did for that particular machine, is I just put that transistor on there because the GPU was working. It just couldn't read the temperature from it. But we'll see. I mean, if it works fine without it, then I'm okay. I don't really mind. So that seems to be working, so I'm pretty happy with that. What I actually want to do now is boot this thing off an operating system. And I need to find a disk that's got that on it. I will have one. So I just installed a hard drive which may or may not have an operating system on it. It's a 120GB SSD. I've got little mounting pins you put on the side of the drive for the brackets. I've got a bunch of those. So I've mounted the drive in there, it's all installed. It doesn't look like it's got an operating system on it, otherwise it would have booted by now. So it's probably a blank drive. So I need to install an operating system on it. By the looks of things, yeah, see, blank drive. So I'll install a system on that and we'll see what happens. Alright, so I've got a 10.12 installer here. I think this drive gives me trouble trying to install a system off it. I'm going to try it again anyway, but we'll see what happens. It's been a while since I've had to use it. If it boots, great. We'll go from there. So this screen isn't perfect either. I just noticed this. There's actually a line down the screen just here. It's like one column of dead pixels. So I was actually wondering about this screen because this isn't an original MacBook Pro screen for this computer. These ones, they have a black bezel around the outside. I'm not quite sure which one this is, which version this is from. But all of my other ones, they're all black fronted. Because I noticed it when I first opened it up, I thought, well, that looks different. What's different about this? And that's what it is. These other ones are all black bezel, this one's not. Looks like the installation is almost finished. It says 6 seconds remaining, but it will say that for probably a minute. Let's see what happens. Does it finish? Usually if it gets this far it should be fine, but there have been times where it stopped like halfway and stuff like that. Is it gone to sleep or is it restarting? Right, looking promising. Let's see what happens. They should be booting off the internal hard drive. It's also accessing the external hard drive as well, the SSD I've been using, which has got all the installation media and stuff on it. That's okay, it's working. Oh no, it's still installing. It's not finished yet. Okay, I'll come back once it's done. Right, so now it looks like it's booting up properly. It's just finished doing the install. Let's see what happens. Hopefully we get a desktop. Usually around here is be doing graphic switching normally, and this will be where it will crash if it's giving me a problem. There we go. So it's try to do a switch this in. There we go. Fine. Use the trackpad. Alright, looks like it's working. Excellent. It's working. This is the 2.3 GHz i7, and as we know, it's got 4 GB of RAM installed, and so it's actually working fine. Obviously, it needs some long-term testing, but it looks like I've got a working machine. So thanks a lot, Steve, for sending this to me. Much appreciated. It looks like it probably was just some dodgy solder joints on that ROM IC where it wasn't quite making connection, which, as you saw, is actually hard to even achieve when you know you need to get it done. It's sort of hard it was for me to get it right. So it's not surprising that you actually overlooked that. It's a shame, but it's got this little line of pixels down here. But in this screen, you can't really see it. It's only on darker sections you can see it. So I think it's not really noticeable. Yeah, it's great. I've got a working machine. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Steve. Check out my other videos down below. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Patreon support link over there if you want to help support the channel.
Click subscribe right now, quick, before you forget.